How does it look?
Perfect.
Hi guys, my name's Noah. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're watching this, it means that my first ever YouTube video has made it onto the internet. Very well may not. Today I want to talk to you about the books that I read in May and some of my thoughts about them and whether I would recommend them. If this does make it onto the internet, it's going to make it onto the internet at the very end of June or probably maybe even July. So yeah, I'm behind, I'm disorganized, what can I say, but better late than never, right? So I read 6 books in May of this year, May 2021. The first of them was Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. So I and literally the whole rest of the world read this book. I know this was the hot release of spring 2021. What can I say? I'm a basic bitch. But this is actually my first ever Ishiguro. This follows the story of Clara, who is an AF or an artificial friend, and it's told through her eyes. So she's a robot, probably more sentient and also less omniscient than one would traditionally expect from a robot or AI in literature or just in our own minds when we imagine one. And it's told through her eyes. So she's an artificial friend chosen to be a companion and live in the home of this girl Josie, who is sick. So I read this book for a book club and I'm really glad that I did, because I think it throws up a lot of really interesting ideas and questions which were so fun to discuss with other people. And I mean, that's what I love about reading, is that it gives you so much food for thought and so much fodder for debate and conversation and exchange of ideas. And this is a great book for that. It throws up so many ethical quandaries. It has a lot of kind of blurry details that leave a lot of room for the imagination and interpretation. But I saw some people on Goodreads rating it low because they wanted some big drama, something like Never Let Me Go-esque twist. So if you know what that is, then you know what I'm talking about. But they thought this was too mundane, or there wasn't that kind of big gotcha moment at the end. That was something I actually really appreciated about this book. Without trying to give away too many spoilers, basically as you read the book, you begin to understand that this world is not the same one that we live in now, and kind of near future where something has gone wrong, like society is starting to slide off kilter towards a more dystopian world. But this is a family drama. It's not like a Hunger Games rebellion against the state or anything like that. It's about a normal family existing and all the kind of minutiae of what that means, the struggles that a family goes through when you have a sick child, and the tensions between people of different backgrounds and classes and political affiliations, and how those play out in everyday lives instead of how those play out in a big war against the state. I mean, I love that kind of thing as well, but don't go into this expecting that. Part of world building and doing world building well is not just this big melodrama that happens when all hell breaks loose. It's about what is it like for someone, for families, for artificially intelligent beings to exist in that world. And that's something this book did really well. I did say in my Instagram caption for this book is that I appreciated it more than I enjoyed it. And that's because I do think it's one of the best written books that I've read so far this year. And it gave me a lot of different ideas to ponder. But there is something kind of lacking or hollow, which comes from having Clara as a narrator. Because she's not human, she doesn't possess the range of emotional powers that humans have. It is somewhat limited in that regard, I think. I feel like I didn't necessarily articulate that very well, but this is like my first ever book review on camera, so there are going to be some hiccups, okay? So in the end, I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I think strictly speaking, it would be more like 3.75, but I'm glad that I read it. I'm really glad I got to discuss it with my friends, and I definitely would recommend it. After saying all that, I was in a bit of a reading slump in May. I'm actually still in a bit of a reading slump in June. So it's probably not the best time to start a YouTube channel talking about books that I'm reading. But hopefully this will help break me out of my slump, you know? So one of the things that I do when I'm in a reading slump is I try to read something really easy that I don't need to turn my brain on, and I really love murder mysteries for this. I found this trashy airport thriller in my room, and this was the time, you know, to... My brain needed a break. It was mush. So I thought this, The Secret, like Katarina Diamond, would be the perfect thing to break me out of it. You know, something you can read in a weekend, something that I just want to know who done it, and I want to be able to switch my brain off and digest it quite quickly and remind myself all the fun you can get out of reading, and as well as all the kind of interesting ideas you get to interact with. Let me just tell you, that was a terrible idea. This book, The Secret, is probably the worst book I read all year. Definitely up there. I can't think of anything worse that I've read since the beginning of 2021. 0 out of 5, would not recommend whatsoever. Do not pick it up. The fact that it says "All Hail the New Queen of Crime" on the top is just so fucking offensive to the actual amazing female crime writers out there. The fact that someone could even think of putting this in the same category as Agatha Christie or P.D. James or J.K. Rowling is just so grossly offensive to me, because this is so fucking terrible. I know I only read it about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, but I honestly can't even remember that much, because it went in one ear, out the other, or one in one eyeball, out the other, or out my bum, because it was so shit. I'm gonna just read you the blurb. When Bridget Reed wakes up in a locked room, terrifying memories come flooding back of blood, pain, and desperate fear. Her captor knows things she's never told anyone. How can she escape someone who knows all of her secrets? As DS Imogen Gray and DS Adrian Miles search for Bridget, they uncover a horrifying web of abuse, betrayal, and murder right under their noses in Exeter. And as the past comes back to haunt her, Gray must confront her own demons, because she knows that it can be those closest to us who hurt us the most. The blurb sounds good, like, okay, it's light, it's not the most complex or challenging or intriguing book, whatever, but it's something to turn your brain off. Wrong. This book will make you angry with how bad, cliched it is. The writing is so simplistic and just not good. The storyline is at the same time convoluted but also cliched. I did not care about the characters. They were either completely irritating and unlikable, or just so 2D that I didn't think about them at all. The kind of reveal as to who the criminal was, it wasn't so much of a mystery with a like, this is it at the end. It was like, you figure it out as you go along. And when I found out who it was, they were like, no one cared. Like, I didn't care. They were a stupid character to have done it. I knew who it was, but like, why would I care that that character did it? I think it's meant to be a bit more of a thriller. I was looking for more of a mystery, but it wasn't a thriller either. It uses so many cliched plot points and does not elaborate on them at all. They're just trying to throw in as many things for shock value as possible. Like, oh, he's people trafficking. Oh, there's a scene where like they bring these girls in and then like these people go and hunt them. And it's a 2-page scene, and it's just meant to be shocking that like these people pay to go hunt girls and kill them. But it's not expanded upon whatsoever. It's literally just for shock value. It feels so fake. Just don't read it. That's my thing. Don't read it. That was really negative and aggressive energy. Okay. Moving on to better things. Basically, that book put me in a really negative headspace. Just, I was angry at the author, I was angry at the publisher, just angry all round. So I really wanted to find something like good, warm, well written, nice to read. And I have seen this book all over YouTube, all over Instagram, people saying it's like a warm hug, that it's really wholesome and really enjoyable. I mean, it says this book is very close to perfect on the cover. So yeah, and I really thought this would be the one. I even bought it in hardback because I didn't want the paperback with the little tab, because I was like, this is going to be something I love, and I want to be able to keep it forever. It is a beautiful, beautiful book, and I'm really sorry to say this. I think it's overrated. Like, I get why people think it's sweet, but this very much felt like I was reading a children's book, which was not what I was looking for going into it. I mean, I checked on Goodreads, the classification, it wasn't even classed as young adult. I thought it was going to be a nice, warm adult book, and it really, really felt like I was reading a kid's book. I realised that I haven't given the description of the book. So in the blurb it says, Linus Baker is a by-the-book caseworker at the department in charge of magical youth. At 40, he lives in a tiny house with a devious cat and his old records for company, but his quiet life is about to change. Linus is summoned by extremely upper management and given a curious and highly classified assignment: travel to an orphanage on a distant island and determine whether 6 dangerous magical children are so dangerous, in fact, that they're likely to bring about the end of days. When Linus arrives at the strangest of islands, he's greeted by a series of mysterious figures, the most mysterious of which is Arthur Parnassus, the master of the orphanage. As Linus and Arthur grow closer, Linus discovers the master would do anything to keep the children safe, even if it means the world has to burn, or worse, his secret come to light. I thought the themes about, you know, found family and accepting people for who they are, and a lot of allegories to kind of liberal values in Trump's America, about as subtle as a brick in the face. It was fine, but I was let down because I went in with such high expectations, and I just was expecting something different. I knew it was fantastical, I knew it was about kids, but this just so much felt like a children's book to me. The other thing that I think may be the issue with The House in the Cerulean Sea is it seems very American to me, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but I think it may be why I had a very different response to it than a lot of other reviewers, because I think most reviewers I've seen talk about this are American, and I think the style, the sweetness, that kind of thing is very much an American sensibility. That doesn't mean that I don't think that Brits can appreciate a kind of good, wholesome story. I just think that the way that we like something like that is quite different. This felt to me like the sweet version of Saturday Night Live's humour. So I don't know if anyone else has experienced this as an English person, but Americans go on and on about how hilarious Saturday Night Live is, and then you watch it as a Brit and it just feels like very in your face, like this is the joke humour. Whereas we like something a bit more dry, a bit more sarcastic, much more kind of mock the weak or peep show. And I think that's the same thing in the sweetness of things. This was too saccharine for me, and it was too in my face. I wanted an adult book and I didn't get that with this book, so that was a disappointment. It wasn't bad, it was fine, it was easy, I read it in a couple of days, but because it wasn't what I was looking for and not what I was expecting, it didn't shake me out of my slump quite as much as I wanted it to. Well, I gave it 3 stars, it was fine, but yeah, probably the least enthusiastic review you'll see on YouTube compared to literally everyone else's. Into a completely different area, I read 80-20 Running by Matt Fitzgerald. I don't know if anyone watching this runs or has heard of the 80-20 method. I think it's also applicable to a lot of other endurance sports, but it's basically the principle that 80% of your training should be done at low intensity. And this whole book basically goes into the science of this. It's a good thing why it will make you faster in the long term, and what was important to me and I really appreciated from it was how to properly assess what is easy, low intensity, because what most people, and definitely I think I'm guilty of, is thinking that something a little bit harder than easy is actually easy. It inhibits recovery. When you do need to push hard, you've limited your upper threshold of performance. So I gave this book 4 stars because I think it did genuinely convince me of this method, even though it's so humiliating to watch my average speed on Strava drop by literally 2 minutes per kilometer versus what I thought was my easy pace and what's actually my easy pace. So I gave it 4 stars because I was convinced by Fitzgerald's arguments. I liked the science behind it. It wasn't too complex for the lay person to understand, i.e. me. I have 3 kind of bugbears with this book. The first is, and this is just a stylistic thing, but I hate the phrasing he uses to support his arguments. So when he's talking about why 80-20 works and an athlete who's used it successfully, he describes them as an Olympic bronze medalist. And when he's talking about why this person training who didn't use 80-20 and did more high intensity training didn't succeed, he says they finished a distant third. Those are both the same places. If he thought he was doing like a big like, whew, I see you, Matt, like they're both the same places. Secondly, he has a very short section on form, and his whole principle about form is like, don't try to change your form. Running in a way that feels natural is probably going to make you faster than working really hard to fix your form. And he gives the example of Mo Farah, because I think Mo Farah has quite low cadence compared to most professional runners. So he's saying, you know, if Mo Farah actually worked to get his cadence up, it would come at the expense of other parts of his natural biomechanics. Fair enough for Mo Farah, but I have like straight up bad form that injures me. Like if I run without really paying attention to my form, which I know fucking slows me down, I get really bad back pain and I can't run, which I've done to myself multiple times, and I can't run right now because of that. There was nothing to consider form outside of like the professional's natural biomechanics. That's something that annoyed me. The other thing, I appreciate that this book has training plans, but the way they are laid out is so annoying. It's so unbelievably annoying. Here's an example of a training plan, like a level 1 marathon. So what you do is you're on this page 199 and then say, okay, my peak phase, I have to do tempo run 2, recovery run 5, foundation run 5, short interval run 1, etc, etc. I don't know if you can see that. I then have to go back like 3 chapters to find out what tempo run 2 consists of, or what recovery run 5 consists of. And it also doesn't even tell me what pages those are on. So I have to flick back several chapters. Here, where are the repetition runs? See, it's so annoying. He needs to either write out what these runs are, this is how it's broken down when you flick back, in the actual training plan, or at least put a page number. Like that, it's not that hard to put a page number reference. That pisses me off. But overall, if anyone is looking to improve their running or reassess their training, I 100% would recommend this. And I think it's also a lot easier to train more and enjoy your sport more if you are doing so much at low intensity. That being said, I haven't run in about a month, so need to get myself back on the wagon with that. The next book I read was this short non-fiction polemic, I might describe it, by Claire Fox, who's now Baroness Fox. I find that offensive. It's about free speech and basically the importance of sharing ideas that people deem offensive. It's a very current issue, and I also appreciate that a lot of the time that it's being done in a very Julia Hartley-Brewer, Mike Iron, is that what he's called? Iron MG, you know, the guy from Talk Radio, like anti-woke, like they're so dumb. And if it's not done in a considered manner, it just sounds stupid, in my opinion. I thought this was pretty good. I have a lot of sympathy for Baroness Fox's position in a lot of these things. I think that it's really dangerous and worrying that, for example, an Oxford college would ban a debate on abortion because it could be harmful for, you know, students who've experienced abortion's mental health. So Baroness Fox introduces the book by talking about 2 kind of controversial talks she gave at schools to throw up these difficult issues and try to posit another point of view. It's about the ability to debate healthily and have spirited conversations and disagree with each other and share ideas without shutting things down in the name of protecting someone's feelings. One of the things that I thought was most interesting in this book, and I hadn't necessarily considered, we are actually creating and reinforcing a system where words continue to compound in terms of the harm they do. I've had the last 10 minutes of whatever I've been speaking about cut off like 5 times now. I'm like this close to giving up. But anyway, I think the last usable video I have is talking about how we are compounding psychological harm and reinforcing the impact that words and damaging and harm and offense are having by placing undue emphasis on them, by kind of protecting people from harmful words and harmful ideas and could harm their psychology. I'm not articulating this very well because I've said it a million times before and I'm getting really tired. But I found that really interesting, and I think it's something that Haidt talks about a lot more in The Coddling of the American Mind, which I haven't read yet but is on my TBR, so I feel like maybe I'll get more out of that then. The big thing that I found was missing from this book is that it does not look at one of the biggest arguments for kind of restricting harmful speech, which is that it creates a more hostile environment, which then leads to people being at greater risk of physical violence. So if you are specifically criticizing aspects of a certain religion a lot, for example, you may then be making members of that religion more likely to become victims of physical violence, because what you've done is normalize a culture in which degradation and hostility is more prevalent. That's not an argument that I necessarily agree with. I think, with the exception of incitement to violence, it's very dangerous to restrict speech, and not something that and definitely not something that the state and other public institutions should be doing. But it is a very big argument, and by ignoring that argument, this book feels a little bit shallow. The other thing that I didn't really like, or I didn't think was well done, was when she's talking about emotional abuse of children. And the general principle is that councils, schools, state institutions have gone way too far in their coddling of children, like in The Coddling of the American Mind. And that an example of this is the wide scope of what is considered emotional abuse and a license for the council to come and take away your child. And this could have been a really interesting point about, you know, why we need to be so precise with our legal language, because otherwise you end up with a massive overreach of powers or creeping scope. But instead the argument just seems to be that emotional abuse doesn't exist, and I would definitely disagree with that. She says, you know, this aspect of language means that, oh, if I yell at my child to discipline them, I am emotionally abusive. And of course, like, parents can raise their voice at their child and tell them off when they've done something wrong and discipline them, but there is a big difference between that and screaming at and degrading and belittling a child from day through night every single day. Even if you do not raise a hand to that child, that is emotional abuse, and that is not something any child should have to go through, and probably a reason to be taken into care. And there's absolutely no nuance in that, which I thought was a real shame. But that being said, I did think it was interesting. It was short, so it was easy to get through. I think it's only about 160 pages. There were some really interesting ideas, like I said, especially the ones about compounding psychological harm. I also really liked her argument about the importance of not posing sexual assault as the defining moment of a woman's life. I think that's a really important thing to discuss, and like she said, something that's become quite taboo. So I would definitely recommend this in light, easy read with some really interesting ideas. The last book I don't have on me because I borrowed it from my sister and then I've given it back to her, but it was The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro again. So I went from not reading any Ishiguro to reading 2 books in a month, and This was so beautiful. I loved it so much. I think I originally gave it 4 stars, but then I brought it up to 5 stars the next day because I just couldn't stop thinking about it. It's essentially about this elderly couple in ancient Britain at the end of the Arthurian age, Axel and Beatrice, and they go on a quest. They leave their village to try to find their son. It's like this Arthurian fantastical quest, but it's all kind of set at the twilight of life. It's at near the end of their lives. A big theme in the book is forgetfulness and forgetting. So they think something's wrong because everyone just seems to not be able to remember things. But my sister said this book was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. I completely agree with that assessment. I very rarely cry when I read, like very rarely, and this book made me cry. I just thought it was so beautiful. I know a lot of people from reading reviews online have been disappointed by this book, and I think if you go into it thinking that it's going to be an Arthurian fantasy and there's going to be a lot of action because of it, then that will be disappointing. So please don't go in expecting that. It is fantastical. It's set in ancient Britain, but there's definitely magical elements to it. But very much like Clara and the Sun, it's very much focused on the domestic, on the elements of Axel and Beatrice's relationship and those they encounter. And there are definitely action scenes. Like, I don't want to give things away. There's definitely action, but it's much more about their relationship and love and forgetting and loyalty to each other, love between parents and children, responsibility, love for a country, love for fellow countrymen, love for a king. I also think that all my talk about love makes it sound really gushy. It's not. I'm not about that kind of thing. I really am not into books that are just love stories or anything like that. But this, I'm not doing this book justice. It's beautiful. It made me cry. Go read it, please. Just don't take stock of the negative reviews because they're negative only because they were expecting something else from the book, in my opinion. If you like character-driven stories, if you like something that's a bit of a slow burn, if you like something that's really beautiful in both its setting and its language, beautiful in its simplicity, sorry, that's my creepy sleep app making that noise, I 100% would recommend this book. Absolutely loved it. It was a great way to round off May. Anyway, those were all the books that I read in May. I hope you found that interesting. Please be sure to like, comment and subscribe. God, I'm such a YouTuber. And click the notification bell because I hope to start doing these a bit more regularly. So seeing as it's literally the last week of June right now, I probably should make a June video quite shortly. So see you then.